clock struck midnight in Atmore, Alabama on May 10, 2002. Inside the walls of Holman Correctional Facility, a 54-year-old woman named Lynda Lyon Block was about to make history. She would become the first woman executed in Alabama in 45 years. But that wasn't her only claim to fame. That night, Lynda was also about to become the last person in America executed by electric chair without having a choice. After her death, no one else would face Yellow Mama, Alabama's notorious electric chair, unless they specifically requested it. 9 years earlier, on October 4, 1993, Block had shot and killed police Sergeant Roger Mley in a Walmart parking lot. The officer was simply doing his job, responding to a concerned citizen who had noticed a 9-year-old boy in apparent danger. Instead of cooperation, Mley was met with bullets. But the story is far stranger than a simple act of violence. Before becoming a cop killer, Lynda Lyon Block was known as a woman of compassion. She rescued abused animals while working as an investigator for the Humane Society. She volunteered at libraries, assisted political campaigns, and was widely regarded as someone committed to helping others. People saw her as a protector of the helpless, someone who worked to make the world a better place. So how did a woman who spent her life caring for others become a cold-blooded killer? How did someone known for compassion end up murdering a police officer who was trying to protect a child? Block and her partner, George Sibby, were members of a group called Sovereign Citizens. They rejected the authority of the American government, destroyed their driver's licenses, birth certificates, and social security records, and claimed they were no longer citizens of the United States. As Lynda Lyon Block sat strapped into the electric chair that night, one question remained. Was she a dangerous extremist who got what she deserved, or a woman driven to the edge by a system she no longer trusted? The truth is complicated, shocking, and unsettling. Before we begin, please like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel because this is not the kind of story you see every day. Remember, this is the final sentence. Stay with us. Lynda Lyon Block was born on February 8, 1948, in Orlando, Florida. Her parents were Francis Frank Lyon and Beryline Owen. From the beginning, life presented challenges that would leave lasting marks on Lynda's early years. When she was only 10 years old, tragedy struck the family. Her father, Frank, died unexpectedly from heart failure. Losing a parent at such a formative age left deep emotional scars, shaping the way Lynda would perceive the world and the people around her. Her mother, Beryline, was a distant and often harsh presence in Lynda's life. According to accounts later given by Lynda, her mother was physically and emotionally abusive, leaving Lynda to navigate a childhood without the comfort of nurturing or affection. Despite this bleak environment, Lynda had one source of comfort: her younger sister Denise, born in 1952. The two girls clung to each other as they grew up in a home marked by neglect and hardship. But even this sibling bond, though protective, could not fully shield Lynda from the consequences of her broken upbringing. The constant exposure to instability and fear made her seek structure, belonging, and a sense of purpose elsewhere. As Lynda matured, she made a life-altering decision that would define her early adulthood. She married Carl Block, an 80-year-old military veteran who had endured personal loss, having lost his own son in a car accident. Some observers later suggested that Lynda, having lost her father at 10, may have sought a paternal figure in Carl. Regardless of the motivation, the marriage was short-lived. By December 1991, the union ended in divorce, leaving Lynda to reconstruct her life once again. After her divorce, Lynda relocated to Key West, Florida, where a different side of her personality began to emerge, one that people remembered for her compassion and commitment to helping others. Lynda worked as secretary for the Humane Society, demonstrating an enduring concern for the welfare of animals. She became an animal abuse investigator, dedicating herself to exposing those who harmed defenseless creatures. Her second husband, George Sibby, later reflected that helping others was not merely a profession for Lynda but a core aspect of her character. Yet Lynda's commitment to the welfare of others extended beyond animals. She actively engaged in community work, serving for 2 years as president of the Friends of the Library. She also took on responsibilities in local politics, acting as publicity director for a candidate running for mayor, and in the process began publishing a political magazine called Liberatus. Through these endeavors, she developed strong anti-government views, which she and George Sibby would later embrace fully. Lynda and George's partnership went beyond shared ideology. They were companions in life and, eventually, crime. By 1992, their growing distrust of the government had evolved into a deep-seated animosity, fueled by conspiracy theories and sovereign citizen beliefs. These were not idle opinions. They were guiding principles that would ultimately lead them to commit violent acts. In August 1992, Lynda and George escalated their defiance into a dangerous criminal act. They broke into the apartment of her ex-husband, Carl Block, physically restraining him by tying him to a chair and gagging him. Their objective was to prevent him from asserting his legal claim to property. The confrontation ended with Lynda stabbing Carl in the chest, a brutal act that left him gravely wounded and forced neighbors to intervene. Carl survived, but the incident cemented Lynda and George's status as fugitives, placing them in direct conflict with law enforcement. By October 1993, Lynda and George were living in constant fear, moving from place to place, avoiding authorities. They had failed to appear for their scheduled sentencing in Florida following the attack on Carl Block. At the same time, Lynda's 9-year-old son was with them, living a childhood that no child should endure. Constantly on the run, in a car, with the looming presence of crime and danger. One passerby, noticing the child's distress and apparent neglect, contacted the police, setting in motion the fateful encounter that would change the course of Lynda's life forever. Sergeant Roger Mley of the Opelika Police Department was the officer who responded to the call. Mley had a reputation as a dedicated law enforcement professional, committed to protecting his community. He was also a devoted husband to his wife, Juanita, and a respected colleague among fellow officers. On October 4, 1993, Mley arrived at a Walmart parking lot to check on the family, unaware that he was stepping into a life-or-death situation. Lynda and George were parked behind the store when Mley approached their vehicle. George Sibby refused to comply with basic legal requests, claiming he was exempt from driving laws and the authority of the government itself. The tension escalated as Mley, sensing imminent danger, reached for his weapon. In an instant, George opened fire. Sergeant Mley returned fire, wounding George, while Lynda, observing from nearby, ran toward the gunfight with her own weapon. She fired at Mley, striking him in the chest, fatally wounding him. The officer had previously given away his bulletproof vest that day, a decision that would cost him his life. After the shooting, Lynda and George fled, leaving Sergeant Mley dying in the parking lot. Police swiftly apprehended the pair, charging them with capital murder. Both refused to cooperate with court-appointed attorneys, insisting that Alabama had no jurisdiction over them. They asserted, with wild conviction, that the state had never been lawfully reintegrated into the United States following the Civil War, and that any action by Alabama authorities was illegitimate. Block and Sibby's claims were rooted in the sovereign citizen movement, a subculture that rejects governmental authority and laws. They had destroyed official documents like birth certificates and social security cards to reinforce their claims of non-citizenship. While the legal system focused on the tangible facts, the murder of a police officer, the couple clung to their delusional theories, showing no remorse or recognition of reality. During the trial, prosecutors could not definitively determine who fired the fatal shot, yet the jury found both guilty of capital murder. The law was clear, and their ideological defenses, however elaborate, held no weight against the verdict. On December 21, 1994, Lynda Lyon Block was transferred to Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women, assigned institutional serial number Z575, marking the start of her death row sentence. Life on death row was harsh, isolating, and unrelenting. Lynda spent the majority of her time in a small cell under maximum security. For over 7 years, she faced the inevitability of state-sanctioned execution while maintaining her anti-government stance. She refused to accept the legitimacy of the legal system, insisting that she was innocent and that Alabama had no right to hold her. Other inmates may have regarded her as delusional, but she remained steadfast, clinging to her beliefs as her final act of defiance. As her execution approached, Lynda chose to represent herself in her final appeals, navigating the complex legal system without formal training. She submitted a handwritten clemency letter to Governor Don Siegelman, requesting the appointment of a 7-member panel to review her case. The governor, however, found no grounds for clemency and rejected her appeal. Meanwhile, George Sibby betrayed Lynda by claiming she had fired the fatal shot, attempting to save his own life at the expense of their partnership. All legal avenues exhausted, Lynda Lyon Block's fate was sealed. Her execution was scheduled for May 10, 2002. She would leave death row and face the electric chair, Yellow Mama, as the final chapter in a life marked by tragedy, compassion, crime, and defiance. On the morning of May 10, 2002, Lynda Lyon Block was moved from Julia Tutwiler Prison to Holman Correctional Facility near Atmore, Alabama. This facility was the site where the state carried out executions. For over 7 years, Holman had been the backdrop of Block's imprisonment, but now it was the place where her life would come to an irreversible end. Other female inmates watched silently as she was escorted from her cell. Some were likely mourning a fellow prisoner, while others may have felt relief that she would no longer be among them. Lynda's presence, once a source of curiosity and caution, now evoked a solemn, almost reverent silence. On her final day, 3 friends came to visit. These were people who had remained loyal to her despite the violent acts she had committed and the life she had led. For several hours, they shared memories, laughter tinged with sorrow, and the fleeting comfort of companionship. Block also met with a spiritual advisor, a final attempt to prepare her mind for the unknown that awaited her. Many on death row seek solace in spiritual counsel, hoping to reconcile with a higher power, or simply to find inner peace in the moments before execution. Lynda Lyon Block declined a last meal, an opportunity afforded to condemned inmates to eat whatever they desired in their final hours. Refusing food was her own statement, an act of defiance and control in a situation where she had so little. She also chose not to deliver a final statement. Typically, last words allow prisoners to apologize, assert innocence, or bid farewell to loved ones. Block's silence reflected her character. Resolute, unyielding, and unwilling to provide closure to a system she considered illegitimate. At exactly midnight, Block was strapped into Alabama's electric chair, Yellow Mama, a device notorious for its efficiency and brutality. This chair had claimed many lives over the decades, but Lynda Lyon Block would become its last victim without a choice, as Alabama would soon transition to lethal injection as the primary method of execution. The hood was placed over her head, shielding her from view and marking the final separation between her and the world she had lived in. At 12:01 a.m., the switch was thrown. Electric current surged through her body, designed to stop her heart and end her life as swiftly as possible. Alabama Department of Corrections Commissioner Mike Haley observed the execution and later remarked that Lynda had shown no emotion, her stare vacant and unyielding until the end. In the witness room, Sergeant Roger Mley's widow, Juanita, could not bear to watch the final moments. She requested to be removed before the procedure was completed. By 12:10 a.m., doctors officially pronounced Lynda Lyon Block dead. The execution lasted exactly 9 minutes, etching her name into history as the last person in America executed by electric chair without having the choice of lethal injection. Lynda Lyon Block's execution carried historical significance beyond her death. She was the first woman executed in Alabama since 1957, ending a 45-year hiatus. Her execution also highlighted the transition in execution methods within the state. After July 1, 2002, Alabama would primarily utilize lethal injection, though prisoners could still elect the electric chair. Block's death was a definitive marker in the history of state-sanctioned executions, symbolizing both the end of an era and the evolution of capital punishment practices. 3 years later, on August 4, 2005, George Sibby followed his former partner to death, executed by lethal injection. Unlike Lynda, Sibby did not face the choice of method, underscoring the ironies and betrayals intertwined in their shared history. His death closed a chapter on the duo's violent spree, but the consequences of their actions lingered in ways that would never fully heal. The most tragic casualty of these events was perhaps Lynda's own son, the child who had been present at the Walmart parking lot nearly a decade earlier. Growing up with the weight of witnessing a mother who became both a killer and a historical footnote to American criminal justice created an enduring psychological burden. He would carry the complex legacy of his mother's life, the intersecting forces of love, protection, and criminality that defined her existence. Sergeant Roger Mley, the officer whose life had been taken, remained honored and remembered by the community. The Opa Police Department, colleagues, and citizens commemorated his sacrifice, inscribing his name on memorials dedicated to fallen law enforcement officers. His legacy served as a stark reminder of the human cost of Lynda Lyon Block and George Sibby's actions, contrasting sharply with the ideological justifications they presented in court. The case of Lynda Lyon Block illuminated the dangers posed by the sovereign citizen movement. While many adherents hold fringe political views without resorting to violence, Block and Sibby's story demonstrated the extreme end of the spectrum. They were willing to kill a police officer in defense of their anti-government beliefs, illustrating how ideology, when combined with desperation and delusion, can manifest in deadly outcomes. Interestingly, Lynda's execution received far less media coverage than similar cases involving male offenders. This disparity suggested a societal bias. Perhaps female criminals attract less attention, or maybe the story's complexity challenged conventional narratives. Nevertheless, the case remains a critical study of gender, criminal justice, and the human capacity for both care and destruction. The ironies of Lynda Lyon Block's life were profound. A woman who had once dedicated herself to protecting helpless animals ultimately became a perpetrator of violence. A mother whose son's welfare should have been her priority instead entangled him in a web of crime and eventual loss. Sergeant Mley's death, in attempting to safeguard that same child, precipitated the execution of the mother, leaving the child orphaned in a profoundly tragic circle of cause and effect. Lynda Lyon Block's story serves as a stark reflection on the intersections of personal tragedy, ideological extremism, and the justice system. Was she a principled woman resisting what she perceived as governmental tyranny? Or was she a dangerous extremist who rationalized murder through ideology? Likely, the truth lies somewhere in between. She was neither wholly villain nor wholly victim, a figure shaped by circumstances, choices, and beliefs that ultimately collided with the unyielding machinery of justice. Her life and death force observers to confront difficult questions. How far can ideology excuse action? To what extent do upbringing and trauma define a person's moral compass? How does society balance punishment with understanding and justice with empathy? The contradictions in Lynda Lyon Block's story, the compassionate activist and the ruthless killer, the devoted mother and the murderer of a police officer, highlight the complexities of human behavior and the consequences that follow from a life lived on the margins of law and morality. Looking back, Lynda Lyon Block's legacy is a cautionary tale, a chronicle of a life caught between compassion and destruction, idealism and criminality. It demonstrates the perils of extremism, the weight of unresolved trauma, and the unyielding force of the legal system when confronted with violent crime. It also underscores a broader lesson about the limits of sympathy and the demands of accountability, illustrating how even the most morally conflicted individuals are held responsible for the lives they touch and take. In the final analysis, the story of Lynda Lyon Block is both historical and deeply human. It is a record of crime and punishment, of ideology and action, of choices and consequences. It is also a story of loss, tragedy, and the enduring impact on those left behind. A police officer whose life was cut short, a child robbed of a mother, and a society forced to reconcile the limits of justice with the human capacity for both good and evil. If Lynda Lyon Block's story made you reflect on the fine line between morality and crime, the consequences of extreme beliefs, and the weight of personal choices, please like this video, subscribe for more true crime cases that uncover the darkest corners of human nature, and share it with someone who seeks gripping, thought-provoking stories.